After I tore my ACL in the last game of the season and Coach Shaw stepped down as head football coach, I was wondering, where was I going to play football next season? I narrowed my decision down to 4 teams, the first of which being the University of Alabama. Playing for Nick Saban meant I'd have a good chance of winning the national championship as well as getting drafted in the first round. Or I could join LSU, who had just won a national championship last season and was known for producing superstars. They had just renovated their football facility and everything was looking icy. I could see myself being there for my final year. But then I remembered that weird-ass video by Brian Kelly and I said there's no way I can play for this guy, which led me to my next option, the University of Georgia, one of the powerhouses in college football, led by Coach Kirby Smart, a disciple of Nick Saban. So I knew I was in good hands for development, but I felt like he was more of a defensive-minded coach. So ultimately, for my final season, I'd settle on the Ohio State University. With a rich tradition and a pedigree of getting guys drafted in the first round, I knew I'd be in good hands with Coach Ryan Day, and we'd have a real chance of competing for the national championship as well. My first game as a Buckeye was going better than I had hoped for. No shade to Stanford, but I was finally on an offense that could produce without me. On the very first play of the game, we'd throw a 67-yard pass, and on the very next play, I'd run this arrow out of the backfield and catch my first touchdown as a Buckeye. I was starting to get comfortable, and things were looking good as they were getting me involved in the running game early. And then I'd watch from the sideline as we'd score our second touchdown in the first quarter to get a 14-point lead. I was the lead blocker on this play as we had an offense that was built like the 49ers. And I really started to feel like Christian McCaffrey because I went from a bad team to a really good one with a bunch of weapons. So I figured even though there was a chance I wasn't going to get as many opportunities as I was getting at Stanford, I'd at least be a little bit more efficient because there was a lot more weapons the defenses had to be afraid of as we got our first dub in my debut. We were taking on Michigan in week 2. Wait, no, that's Central Michigan. This was the first of 3 Michigan teams we'd play this season. And since the other 2 were Michigan State and Michigan, I figured this would be the easier of the 3 games. But boy oh boy was I wrong as we threw this interception late in the first quarter and I would get blocked just before I could make the tackle and they take it all the way for a touchdown. Before you knew it was 27-7, but we managed to crawl our way all the way back to 27-24 when the defense got this sack that resulted in a fumble recovered for a touchdown and we take the lead. I ran as hard as I could in the fourth quarter to try and milk this clock, but ultimately Central Michigan had another opportunity and with 12 seconds left would throw this Hail Mary that would get completed all the way down to the 5 and they'd be able to send this game into overtime. And even though I'd get stopped short of the sticks on this third down in the first overtime, our defense will be able to hold and force it to a second OT. And you know I made a career out of game-winning touchdowns. So when I caught this one, it was really nothing new. I was flabbergasted we went to double OT with Central Michigan, but I was just happy to get out of there with the dub. But clearly we weren't the only team that was struggling with bad opponents as Alabama lost to Arkansas State and we were now number 1. We were getting ready for another tough Big Ten opponent in Wisconsin, as neither team would be able to score in the first quarter. And Coach Ryan Day would finally start getting me involved in the offense as I'd complete that catch and then take this pitch from the option and make a couple guys miss, and finally punch it in from 1 yard out. And clearly giving me the rock was working as we were up 16, and they just kept finding creative ways to get the ball in my hands with screen passes and counters. The crowd at Wisconsin was rocking in the first quarter of this one, but by the fourth quarter, you could start feeling the hush come over the crowd as I'd extend our lead to 3 scores and was proving that my ACL injury was a thing of the past as I was running dudes over and I wanted to prove that I could be a bell cow still, which is why I was so excited I got my first Player of the Game award as a Buckeye. We were taking on an Oklahoma team that was a lot more talented than their record indicated as we'd go down 17-7 to them late in the second quarter. But after I caught this pass, I made sure no one was going to catch me, and I had the most explosive play of the season. I was able to prove to scouts that I still had that long speed that was in question after my ACL injury. This catch would put us in field goal range just before the half, but unfortunately, we'd miss it wide right, which was clearly a bad omen, as we would go down by 20 to Oklahoma, and this touchdown late meant absolutely nothing, as we got upset and I got held to my worst rushing performance of my career, just 3 yards. We would drop all the way down to number 9 in the country, and we had to travel again this week, this time to Indiana. But after last week's abysmal performance, which included 8 carries for 3 yards, I had a conversation with Coach Day and I told him I need the ball in my hands more. And I promise the more I touch it, the better chance we're going to have of winning. And it was clear he was listening to me because he was giving me the rock and I was making shit shake. And with just 9 seconds left in the half, I'd run this angle route and I couldn't believe that they put a linebacker on me one-on-one. The ultimate sign of disrespect. I was continuously proving to scouts that I was one of the most electric players in the country and I was deserving of a first-round draft selection. I was no longer just a scat back. I was fighting for every single yard I could get. and I had no idea why this dude had his hand in the air because they were getting blown out. And it only get worse for them because I take this run all the way and extend our lead to 32 in the fourth. This was a signature game for me, and probably the best game I've had since I've been at The Ohio State. This was one of the weirdest games I've ever been a part of. We were taking on Michigan State, the second of the 3 Michigan teams we will play this season. And this was the flukiest play of all time. This ball would somehow get fumbled, go backwards 40 yards, and have us in a 3rd and 50. And things really didn't get much better from there, because on 3rd down, me and the quarterback weren't on the same page, as he was expecting me to sit in that window. And if 61 had just blocked this dude that was coming straight for me, there was a good chance I probably would have scored on this play. But we had to settle for a field goal instead. This was looking like a defensive battle, but our offense was finally starting to get clicking a little bit. And on this 3rd and 12, our quarterback would make a great throw, and our receiver would make an even better catch, as he'd help give us the lead just before the half. And then our offense would take over in the 3rd quarter and extend our lead, and we just wouldn't look back. And even though my numbers weren't looking too great, I was just glad we got the dub in this low-scoring Big Ten matchup against Michigan State, and we were creeping our way back into the playoff picture. This game against Penn State started off terribly, because instead of hitting me in the flat while I was wide open, he tried to force a ball in the middle of the field and would get intercepted, which would lead to a Penn State touchdown. And I'm gonna be honest, I really wasn't even expecting to get this pitch from our quarterback. But I'd get it and I'd run as hard as I could and bring us all the way down to the 10-yard line. And just a couple plays later, I'd truck this dude so hard I could see the Sonic coins falling out of him. The game was finally tied up, and we were executing the triple option to perfection. We were putting together a nice drive that would end in a Jay Ballard touchdown just before the end of the 3rd to give us the lead. But Penn State would answer, and we'd have to go to overtime for the 2nd time this season. Our quarterback Kyle McCord would run it in, and Penn State would answer right back. But they would miss the field goal, and the game would end 28-27. We went into Beaver Stadium, and we gave them the wood. Pause. But in all seriousness, I was just glad that our road trip was finally finished. I played the greatest first quarter in college football history, as I took the first play of the game all the way for a 75-yard touchdown. If there was ever going to be a game that proved to NFL scouts that I was a first-round talent, it was going to be this one, as I talked my shit to the crowd after that touchdown. On the very first play of the next possession, I take this handoff, make this dude miss, and I thought I was going to take this one to the house too, but I'll get caught by my shoelaces. The coaching staff kept feeding me anyways, and I took the very next run for a touchdown, and then on the 3rd possession, I'd score again, and I'd finish the first quarter with 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. I thought I was going for the NCAA record, but for some reason, we didn't run it as much in the 2nd and 3rd quarter, and when I was supposed to just run the clock out here, I took it all the way. I had the single greatest statistical game of my career. We were facing an Iowa team that was trying to become bowl eligible. The Hawkeyes were a physical team, so I knew that we couldn't take them lightly, especially with this being a road game. And they were doing a great job of bottling me up initially, but this was one of the most physical runs of my career as I bulldozed a couple dudes over to give us the lead. And I was serious about proving to scouts that I was still one of the most explosive players in the country, and also one of the best receiving backs in the country. These games were big time resume builders, but probably the most important thing I was trying to do was prove that I can take big hits and not get injured, as I had the reputation of Glass Boy all of last season. But surprisingly this year I really didn't have too many injuries, and I was getting the ball a lot more than I thought I was going to be in this high-powered Ohio State offense. With a couple more big-time games like these, I figured that I should be in the Heisman conversation. I started this game off against Purdue with one of the best sideline tiptoe break tackles I've ever seen. And even though I knew that Purdue was going to give us their all because they were fighting for a bowl spot, but in my head, this was just a tune-up game for the game of the year against Michigan. Surprisingly, this game was pretty close going into the 3rd quarter. We were just up 4. And after trucking that dude, I showed that I was the dead leg king still. And I'd keep proving it over and over and over again. Shout out to Marshawn Lynch. And then I had one of the nastiest jukes of my life on 3rd and 6 with the game on the line. And on the very next possession on 3rd and 14, I'd make this dude fall harder than Big Show off the top rope, as we were slowly crushing the dreams of the Boilermakers of making it to a bowl game. And I must have looked like Freddy Krueger to them, because every time I touched the ball, it was a nightmare. I had another monster game on the ground, and I was getting excited to play Michigan for a chance to go to the Big Ten championship and a ticket to the playoffs, something I dreamed about my entire career. We were finally in the playoff picture again after losing to Oklahoma earlier in the season. This game was decided by 2 points, as we were at the Horseshoe taking on Michigan in the big game, and their defense was hitting me harder than I've ever been hit in my career. And even though I was able to get our team to the red zone, our quarterback wouldn't convert on this 3rd and 6, and we'd have to settle for a field goal. And in the second quarter, I'd get brought down by my face mask, and I'd get up and I was getting ready to scrap whoever did it. But then I saw I was number 90 and I was like, alright, let me chill out. And that face mask on third down would propel us to this catch, which would help put us in field goal range. We really needed a touchdown here, but our quarterback just loved to run for whatever reason. He'd take a sack, and we were down by 8 late in the third, and I figured this was my time to shine, as I would single-handedly bring us down the field, and then I'd catch this screen pass, follow my blocks, and take it all the way for a touchdown. But unfortunately, we couldn't get the 2-point conversion, so this late touchdown would be meaningless, as we would fall to Michigan 21-19 in the biggest game of the year, and knock ourselves out of the playoffs. That loss to Michigan was devastating. But at least some good came after the game. I would win the Doak Walker Award for the best running back in the country, as well as be named a first-team All-American. I couldn't believe this was the last game of my college career, as we were taking on North Carolina in the Rose Bowl, and my childhood dream of playing in the Rose Bowl would quickly turn into a nightmare. I was playing poorly, and me and the quarterback definitely weren't on the same page on this route, as it got intercepted and led to another touchdown, and it only got uglier from there. The very next possession, we threw another interception, and we were down 21-0 before we knew it. I like to think that we played so poorly because we thought that we should be in the playoffs, so we weren't really taking this game too seriously. But North Carolina was just beating our ass. At least I got to say that I scored a touchdown in the Rose Bowl, and I could finally put my full attention towards the combine as I walked off the field and reflected on my career. I finished my career with 4,800 yards on the ground and almost 3,000 receiving yards. And I was able to go to the combine and showcase myself as one of the more athletic players there. This was an incredible journey, and after my playing days, I was thinking maybe one day I could end up being a college coach. But first I had to find out who I was going to get drafted by.
With the 30th pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select
Yadid Rambo.